Very much. Yeah, so I'm very happy to be here, and I'm also very grateful to the Embassy of the Kingdom of the Netherlands for this invitation to speak here on a topic that's very dear to my heart, responsible innovation in the digital world. Actually, it's very appropriate to mention, I think, that this originated, this idea of the, let's say, welding together of ethics and new technologies with this term responsible innovation, was invented in the Netherlands, in The Hague, by the Dutch Research Council. And from there it was exported to Brussels, and then it took over the world. I mean, not completely, but I will show you in a tour d'horizon what this means, and I would like you to focus on, I think, a very important ingredient, since the term has become a little bit of a household name, but people sometimes forget to highlight the thing that I think makes it really important, and also very important for us to guide us through this very kind of bewildering development of artificial intelligence and new digital technologies that we see and read about every day in the newspaper. And that's the core idea of design, right? From this point, usually people talk about describing the world better and more accurately, predicting the world, explaining the world. But there is another cognitive relation of the subject to the world, and it is designing the world, is thinking about how the world could be, unfortunately not is. And this is also the place where engineers and ethicists meet, because both of them think about a possible world that is not yet there. There's no bridge, and the engineer wants to build the bridge, so he pictures to his mind's eye, that there could be a bridge or a hovercraft shuttling back and forth. And the ethicist thinks about a world without torture, a world that is more just. People don't humiliate each other, and is unfortunately not realized. So both meet in the middle when they think about the specifications and the requirements for designing a new world. And that's exactly the bridging concept that we need in order to prevent this disconnect between, on the one hand, the people keep going on about how the world could be, utopias and moral principles and ethical, and on the other hand, on the Monday morning, people who are going to code and design and produce things. The two have to come together, and the middle ground is this design notion. The engineers have to think about their requirements in light of ethical principles, and the ethicists need to take the trouble to specify their high-level values in terms of requirements. So that's the message in short. Now, I hope that you still stay after this introduction. Now, the European Commission that I work for said already in 2018 that the way we approach artificial intelligence, and I will use artificial intelligence as a very visible manifestation of advanced digital technologies, but quantum, robotics, Internet of Things are in the same category. The way we approach artificial intelligence will define the world we live in. Already in 2018, and indeed many people try to define and shape that world, and there's even a kind of a battle and a geopolitical battle going on, and people are claiming victory, and while Trump is very good at that, of course. And this leaves us in the middle, Europe. So is Europe, sometimes you hear this worry, Europe is going to be a museum where people go on holiday, but we're no factor of any importance in terms of innovation, research and development, and economics. Are we going to be the museum of the world, or perhaps the cradle of a new enlightenment, because we were the cradle of the first enlightenment, why not the second? Then the European Commission also said in 2019, let's forget about the USA and China or Russia or everyone who is kind of rallying to be the winner of this. Embrace the opportunities offered by artificial intelligence in a way that is human-centered, ethical, secure, and true to our core values. That is what our core business should be. And of course, we know what those core principles are. because we have the Charter, the UN Charter, we have the fundamental rights, and we have the European Convention on Human Rights. So we know what we should be about. Whatever we do in terms of science, technology, and business development, that should be positively related to these constitutive and binding treatises that we have in Europe. And I mean, include all of us here in London, of course. This is, think about the Eurozone. Others from the private sector make similar statements. You can find them everywhere. So this is Sundar Pichai, CEO of Google. AI is probably the most important thing humanity's ever worked on. Here he's a little bit more nuanced, right? How do we avoid the dangers of artificial intelligence? His smile is disappearing, and here it's about, will artificial intelligence destroy humanity? It's a gloomy perspective, and justifiably so, because there's a lot of debate about the existential risk of artificial intelligence. A couple of months ago, Jeff Hinton, the Nobel Prize winner for machine learning in physics, stood at this place talking about the existential risks of artificial intelligence. And he said, this is the place where he stood, if you sleep well tonight, you may not have understood this lecture, right? He is really, really worried, and he even stepped back from Google, his position at Google, to be able to be part of the public debate, because he thinks we should be really, really worried. And all the other ones, you have Stuart Russell, you have Clark from Anthropic, we have Joshua Bengio, Jeff LeCun. And there are other people who say, well, don't get distracted by all of this. Keep an eye on the things that are changing right under your nose, because all of these discussions about existential risks and humanity being wiped off the face of the earth, that's a kind of trick to divert the attention, because things are changing, people are discriminated against, because AI has biases built into it, and it will play out in a particular way in healthcare, in the criminal justice system, etc. So we have to, of course, think about those existential risks, but at the same time, we have to really pay attention to the things that are changing right under our noses, and there are people who are going to benefit from the things that are changing under our noses. And wonderfully described in this paper by Emily Bender and others on generative AI, and the paper is called On the Dangers of Stochastic Parrots, right? And we know we're all using probably, can we have a show of hands, how many people are using ChatGPT? And more to come. It hallucinates, it makes up things, it's biased, it's unexplainable, it's conservative, because it's looking at the database of the internet as it was until now. It violates your privacy if you enter your personal data. It's not up to date, it misleads, and it concentrates the powers in the hand of big tech players. In the meanwhile, it's also the victim of brain rot, because it keeps kind of low quality is added all the time, so the quality of the output goes down. This is called the Ouroboros effect, or model collapse, where the serpent bites into his own tail. So we have to prevent that. Just The Guardian. This week, a detection firm finds 82% of herbal remedy books on Amazon are likely to be written by AI. So that's, here you go. It all originates basically from the fact that it's a very intransparent. I'm not going to do the work of Jeff Hinton here. That's called epistemic trespassing. But just to remind you of the fact that these models are black boxes to us. And even if we could look inside at the simple versions, we have a little bit of an understanding. We can gauge what has been happening. But when we're getting to trillions of parameters, which we are now with ChatGPT 5, it is impossible for us to really understand what is going inside. So AI is a very special case. It is a master or meta technology. There is no technology that can do without these types of advanced and smart AI applications. It develops it with exceptional speed. The scale of the user engagement, we're now getting to billions of users. The ferocity of what has been called Red Queen dynamics. So you have to keep running harder and harder to remain at the same place because there's this one-upmanship of innovation. The geopolitics, of course, the lethality of military AI, and the concentration in the hands of a very few, the magnificent 7 big tech players. I was reminded of this remark by Vestea, the former commissioner of competition of the European Commission, and she remarked when ChatGPT was really kind of breaking through and finding its way to the market, and more users started to use it, she said, I think if we're all honest with ourselves about our technologies, including social media, we probably wish we had not done things in the past. You know, we could have, but we should we have? And so let's work together to get this right about AI, because the stakes are now a lot higher. If we would have known then, when social media were introduced, what we know now about the impact in society, we would have decided differently. And we're at the same point with respect to artificial intelligence, so let that be a reminder. Now, what's the answer? The answer given also by Sundar Pichai, not only that he's worried and he sees potentially that that mankind may be wiped off the face of the earth, we have to do responsible innovation. We have to introduce new functionality, new smart technology, but we have to proceed responsibly. Right? That's the idea. So Google talks about this. They have even signed a voluntary code of the European Commission to be very careful and to proceed responsibly. Microsoft talks about responsible innovation. Meta has introduced responsible innovation principles. I don't know whether they still stand, right? Because new president, new economic policies, new subsidies, their ethical stance may change. But in any case, they have introduced it. And what is one of the first and most important characteristics of responsible innovation, I will come to more, is that we address the problems of humanity. There are very, very urgent problems to solve, and we know what those problems are. We used to refer to them as the grand challenges, then we refer to them as the UN Millennium Goals, poverty reduction, primary education, infant mortality, maternal health. Now we refer to them typically as the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And they require urgent solutions. We've also said we need to solve them before 2030, many of them, right? And of course, it's a no-brainer. Artificial intelligence can do a lot, but let's try to focus on these things that we urgently need to solve, the problems that we urgently need to solve in healthcare, in science, in energy transition, circular economy, and smart mobility. And the UN has also understood this, because every high-level UN meeting now is preceded by a meeting of the technology facilitation mechanisms. A group of scientists and engineers and experts in technologies, very broad range, to inform the UN, diplomats, international lawyers, about technology and what the potential of the technology is to solve our problems. And that's a good development, of course, because we need that. So there is this realization that technology has caused a lot of problems. It's cause of our problems, but at the same time, it needs to be part of the solution. The two things go together. But this creates a tension, because in solving those problems, in energy transition and in mobility and transport and in healthcare, we also have to abide and respect the ethical principles that are so important to us, and we know what they are. So that's the tension. AI for good sounds nice, but we have to also make sure that we are respecting those fundamental. So this is a balancing act, a commitment to core moral values like privacy and intellectual property and sustainability, and on the other hand, we have to find urgently solutions to our problems. So this is a famous compatriot. My policy on cake is pro-having and pro-eating, right? So that's, can we have our cake and eat it? Can we eat our cake and have it? Well, that he is, perhaps for reasons he didn't completely understand when he made this claim, But he's thinking in the right direction. And I will try to show how that is. The first question that we have to answer with any innovation, if someone comes to you and says, well, I have something very innovative, then our first question should be, yes, but that per se doesn't make it good, right? Let's see whether it's innovative for sure, but is it something that is worth wanting? Will it make us all better off? Now, here's a good idea. It's a Delft thing. I have a couple of nice examples from the Netherlands. So this is a spoon that counteracts the tremor of a Parkinson patient. So they don't need to be assisted in eating soup or yogurt. So it restores their autonomy, independence, and dignity and privacy. So that's a no-brainer. But looks at this Internet of Things application that Amazon tried to push through in 2015. This is a Internet of Things little kind of button that you stick on your fridge. And when you're running out of, in this particular case, it's macaroni and cheese craft, you can push on the button and then it will, over the internet, will get you delivered on your doorstep, the macaroni and cheese in the quantity that you require, delivered on your doorstep. So that's wonderful. But you see a lot of electronics there, batteries, and so that's... Now, in the case of toilet paper, you may be a little bit late, pushing that button. But you see that these things proliferate in a household, and before you know, it's everywhere. And therefore, it was decommissioned because after all, it wasn't really a good idea. So that's the question that we need to ask, and not with a time lag of 4 or 5 years, right? While these things are being produced and being put into action, but preferably before. Self-parking slippers, also a very nice application of artificial intelligence. Let's not do that. And now, with respect to artificial intelligence, we have seen the last 2 weeks that the big players are opening it up to erotic conversations. So Sam Altman is doing that. Elon Musk already went in this direction. Meta is also moving in this direction. So they are strapped for cash. They want to see some revenues now, and this seems to be an obvious way to go. And the question is, do we have all that compute power with the sustainability effects to have these kind of conversations of this type? There are some serious problems with generative AI and mental health because of a feature that is built into the software, into the models, which is sycophancy. So it is very flattering. If you ask a silly question, then the first reaction of ChatGPT is, well, that's a very interesting idea. Perhaps we should think about it. But if vulnerable people with mental problems have that kind of reaction and not a kind of a fair feedback, then they may run into trouble. And actually, we've submitted a paper with a couple of psychiatrists in the Netherlands who have seen patients that actually were triggered, their psychosis and delusional episodes were triggered by conversations with ChatGPT. The patients even brought ChatGPT to the conversation with the psychiatrist, and so they were in a kind of three partners to the conversation. This is only possible with machine learning, with artificial intelligence, and that is called targeted dream incubation. And 40 sleep researchers, the best sleep researchers in the world, published an open letter to express their worries about commercial parties who were trying to experiment and learn about how to manipulate dreams of people through the speakers or the smartphones next to their bed. Right, so that's a serious. Now, this is much better. This is a better approach. Can we do, and this is also a Londoner, famous one, also a Nobel Prize winner, Demis Hassabis of Google DeepMind, and again, our friend Sundar Pichai, this week, breakthrough in cancer treatment, and his claim, AI must serve people rather than exploit attention, as we saw in the titillating conversations that now are. Can we please aim at solving urgent and important problems where we can really make a difference? That's I think the trick. The rough idea is, can we with new technology provide solutions to our urgent problems without creating new ones or exacerbating existing ones, and while we are in compliance with extant law and with widely shared ethical principles? Now, this is the breakdown of it. Identify serious societal problems, develop robust, novel functionality that demonstrably solves problems without creating new ones that are worse or as bad or exacerbating old ones. And in advance, think about options, alternatives, and their consequences and implications, and then evaluate these consequences in terms and options explicitly in ethical terms. Call a spade a spade. When it's about privacy, call it privacy. When it's about sustainability, call it sustainability. And when it's autonomy or responsibility, use that label, because that's the way we need to think about the world if we want to be honest to ourselves. And then, this is something that we have done for a long time, also in our personal lives. When you consider a moral choice, it is about, okay, what are the options open to me? What are the consequences of these actions? Let's evaluate these actions in explicit ethical terms. What does it do for your dignity, for your feelings, etc.? And the new thing is, what is really new and that is urgently needed, that is use these moral considerations as requirements for new design, for new technology. So the ethics needs to be specified in terms of design requirements. All the things that we can, think of, put them in terms of requirements. Now, what are we thinking and talking about concretely? This is again a nice Dutch example. It's called the Dutch ethical smartphone, or the fair phone. And these blue labels kind of represent moral or societal desirabilities. Wouldn't it be nice if you wouldn't have to throw this thing out of the window when one component is broke, but it can be replaced, so it's modular. It has replaceable battery. Material is from countries that are not run by dictators. It's dual SIM, so if you need two phones, you can use just one. In this, so this is a way of, by design, you can satisfy a lot of different ethical requirements. That's the thing. This is a bus stop in Utrecht. It received some attention internationally. Why? Well, because it's very innovative in the sense that it captures rainwater, it accommodates insects in the city, it reduces heat stress. It's a whole list of things that one design in one fell swoop satisfies. Now, that's the kind of pattern that I would like you to focus on. That is something that I will be coming back to. This is the defense against the sea in the Netherlands. We have a water problem, like you in some parts of the country. So we made a garage or a parking lot under the dunes to fortify and to kind of shore up this building. So it defends us, water safety, it defends us against the sea. It hides the ugly cars. So it's good for recreation and environment. So three things that you want in one design. You see, that's the idea. This is a foldable container. 40% of containers go empty in the world. And these ships are huge polluters. So if you can reduce the number of ships going around, because you can have 4 containers, foldable containers, in the space of one without having to change, let's say, the dimensions of the ships or the quays or the cranes, everything can remain the same. So you have served sustainability. Right? So you see, this is also a case for my university, 3D printed nanopore prosthesis. Right? What do you want? You want the number of complications and the mortality statistics going down after surgery, often old people who need a hip replacement, etc. So what's the problem? Complications, infections, etc. So what they have done is they have created material and printed it in such a way that it furthers and enhances the growth of bone tissue, regeneration of bone tissue at the site of the surgical intervention. It kills the bacteria at the site of the intervention, and it stimulates the growth of blood vessels at this place because you need the blood there. So that is, and they have, I know them personally, so they have been looking at these statistics. How can we tweak it in such a way that we can achieve those moral goals? Now, innovation is driven by this moral obsession. How can we limit the number of complications and people dying after surgery? Same for the bronchoscope. They found out that they could do all of these things except it was difficult to sterilize. And then they had to work on that. You see, you keep pushing the moral envelope and trying to get to a space where you can satisfy many, many, many of the things that you really want from a societal, legal, and ethical point of view. So that is, what are these examples now examples of this pattern? That you have a set of moral values and that the innovation is the way to accommodate all of those values in one fell swoop, in one design. So responsible innovation is designing of new functionality that allows us to expand the set of obligations that we can satisfy. We're pushing the boundaries, and we're motivated to do that because right from the start we have recognized that this is possible, that we could do that in principle. So this is what we need for digital innovations as well. Many of these examples had some smart components, but were also taken from. So it has a broad application. And this is, I keep coming back to these colleagues in Brussels, but this is one very important, influential legal advisor of the European Commission, was very important in the GDPR of the Data Protection Act, and also in the Artificial Intelligence, the AI Act. And he said, in order to protect and strengthen Western liberal democracies in the age of AI and the core Trinitarian idea of human rights, rule of law, and democracy, we need a new culture of technology and business development, which we call human rights, rule of law, and democracy by design. The idea is that if you don't design for it, it will not happen, right? So you have to really work on that. It was in the Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society, by the way, that paper. So now let's look at have a closer look at the design value nexus. What is the relationship between designs and values? It has three parts. Valuing is design consequential. Designs are not value neutral. And we can overcome tensions between values by design. So ideas are design consequential. So if you are so big and so always pontificating on sustainability and you're really you think it's really important, I would like you to think about how to bring that closer, how to realize your ideal, how to exemplify that value in the world. So I would like to see proposals for, keeping your garbage in different, separating it out. Or if you think that equal access to healthcare is very important, I would like to see these kind of proposals from you. And to the extent that you are willing to invest and think about these the ways in which you could realize this, I consider you to be more committed to that value, right? So if you're really committed, I expect you to be forward-thinking, forward-looking, and very precise about how we could realize that value. To value X means to care about, to desire, and to prefer a world where X is realized, implemented, and designed for. So endorsing or having a particular value seriously and authentically means that you are interested in a world that is hospitable to that value. So, for example, IBM's coercive control resistant design. You see this idea that became clear in the COVID is there was a lot of domestic violence and people being manipulated, stalked, etc. And that's called, and it's even in your Serious Crime Act, a repeated and continued behavior that is controlling or coercive. And many smart technologies like smartphones or access to bank accounts or even children's toys were used by the perpetrators of this coercive control to manipulate people, to gaslight, for example, to change the timeline of people's accounts, etc. So that was a real issue also identified by the WHO. And IBM acted on that, and they tried to come up with solutions so that people would get notifications when people tampered with their timelines or changed their calendars or appointments in their diaries, etc. So that's a whole set of design principles to bring this idea of closer that we should get rid of this. This is a drone that is designed completely. Every feature that you can see, that it carries blood samples from remote islands in Denmark to the hospital or to the lab. And it's completely designed according to this idea that if something is important, if something is a moral value or is a legal requirement, then it should show up in the design of the artifact. And every thing that I can point my finger to can be justified and explained in terms of the value that it serves. Right? So we don't have the time to go into the details. So if you talk about human-centered AI or privacy-respecting AI or explainable AI, I expect you to do work on that and show me how that is realized. Right? And if you're not doing that, you're not taking that value seriously, and there's the suspicion that it's just marketing talk and greenwashing. Right? The other side of the relation is that designs are value-laden. This is hostile architecture, right? If you don't want to have 50 people running around the park chasing people away who are sleeping on a park bench, you can design it this way. It's not going to solve the problem of people who don't have a place to sleep. But in any case, you see what the idea is, right? So you can design it in, and probably you have seen this example. This is a low-hanging overpass, New York, and it was intentionally designed, and this is Langdon Winner's work. He's at Rensselaer Polytechnic. Showed that these things were designed by a famous town planner, Robert Moses, who was a little bit of a racist. And he made them intentionally low so as to prevent buses from poor black neighborhoods to be routed to the white middle-class beaches near New York. So it is a racist overpass, right? Because it keeps buses going, transporting people from black poor neighborhoods to the white middle-class beaches. So artifacts do have politics. They come with an inscribed and expressed value. They're not value neutral. And everywhere you look, you will find examples of that. Famous here, Bentham, the Panopticon, or the dome-shaped prison. He said, I can solve all of these problems all by a simple idea in architecture. We don't need security guards to run through corridors. If we have only one person sitting in the middle looking around, that's a very efficient organization. And he even remarked in a footnote, I think somewhere, that you don't even need that person in the middle in the watchtower if you can make people believe that there is someone there, right? So you have bias in search engines, you have algorithmic bias in news feeds, people tweaking with the algorithms, with the recommenders. So we're all victim of that, right? So that it's constantly going on. These things are designed for addiction. I'm ashamed to say that there are people at universities working on how we can make these things more addictive. You can get a PhD in it and a professorship. It's a science, right? You can design for contrived durability or planned obsolescence. We can make light bulbs that will burn for 100 years. This is a centennial light bulb, but they're made not to last 100 years. So this idea of the value design nexus, that values are design consequential and that designs are never value neutral, that must be used responsibly. because our cities of tomorrow will be smart cities. There will be so many applications of robotics, AI, Internet of Things, Internet of Bodies perhaps even, that everything is designed. Everything here is designed from A to Z, and choices have been made, like in the low-hanging overpass. Right? So it's very true what Winston Churchill said: we shape our buildings, and thereafter our buildings shape us. We become like the building that we have designed and that we live in. So this, with information systems, it happens everywhere. The system that you use, the application that you use, is the result or the consolidated set of choices that people have made with respect to the coding, to the ontology, to the security aspects of it, the algorithms, the recommenders, the integrity constraints, etc., etc., etc. So this is the key problem. The key problem is we don't want our racist ideas to end up into the technology. We want our shared values to be expressed in the right-hand world, the world of engineering, and the other yellow bulb is the world of ethics, right? And we want to be able to justify and explain that this happened in the right way. So the minister has to explain why this electronic patient record system nationwide is indeed respecting individual privacies, indeed increasing the patient safety, and is indeed reducing the cost of healthcare. So this is a book that will be soon, hopefully, available open access, and it has many, many chapters on designing for X, where X ranges over your particular value. And also some parts on the methodology of it. But the core idea here is that you have these values like privacy, and everyone talks about on the Friday evening with a good glass of red wine and thinks it's very important. And then on the Monday morning, we have to design for it and show that we have successfully designed for it. So these values are mere high-level or abstract, non-functional requirements, as engineers say. They are non-functional. Some people say to me, well, privacy is so important that it's not appropriate to call it non-functional. It's become functional, right? You cannot put something on the market that's not privacy respecting. So it's and these have to be functionally decomposed. So now ethics has become a matter of the functional decomposition of non-functional requirements. And here you can see what I indicated in the beginning in my introduction, that we have carved out a middle ground for engineers and ethicists and lawyers and concerned people of the civil society, members of civil society, to meet and to have really something to discuss in a tractable way. So this is what we do with at technical universities in the Netherlands, but also in other places. I will have some examples later on. So what do you mean privacy? Well, privacy is risk mitigation, accountability, data quality, security. These are norms, mid-level ethical considerations. They can be made more precise, and they already point to certain techniques that support that. Risk mitigation by coarse-graining your data, or data clustering, or pseudonymization. And now someone could say, with his laser pointer, say, well, I missed something there in the design requirements. For example, data minimization, right? That's also a requirement. So you see, you have now decomposed the problem, and it's very clear, and now you can have a sustained and fairly detailed debate about how you want to proceed. So this brings us to the importance of this breakdown of high-level ethical concepts. So the importance of what we call conceptual engineering. Now, if you look at these notions, on the right-hand side, these are ethical notions, and on the left-hand side, you see technologies, and I sometimes say to my students, if you combine a randomly chosen term in the left column with a randomly chosen one item in the right-hand column, you have a nice topic for your paper. So AI and sustainability, or deep learning and accountability, or big data and privacy, and you can go on and on and on and on. But unfortunately, there's a lot of confusion because these are, let's say, philosophical concepts, friendship, give me a definition of what friendship is. Children come home and they say, I have 1,000 friends. Well, then you're working with a different definition than I am using. So it's difficult to give definitions. These are philosophical notions. There's a lot of disagreement about it. And now they have been prefixed by these terms from the digital realm. So cyber community, we're already struggling to define what a community is, or what intelligence is, or what a person is. And now we have net friendships, and we have online education, and we have a blockchain organization, and we have algorithmic fairness. What do you mean? In order to design something, you have to know what you're talking about. Otherwise, you won't be able to design for it. So if you use those terms, so you would say, digital democracy, what do you mean? A sort of democracy, you're taking out a mortgage on a definition that you still have to supply. But you're using a kind of nice sounding word, but it's still fairly vague. So you're working in a conceptual vacuum, and therefore you have a policy vacuum, because if you don't know what you're talking about, which norms or which regulations would you put in place? And therefore you have this design vacuum. You don't know what to design for because you don't know what you're talking about. So this colleague, US, defined, 21, 30 different definitions of algorithmic fairness. A system, an AI system that doesn't discriminate and treat people unfairly on the basis of their race or religion or gender. So which definition is yours? If you are at customs, or you're handing out mortgages or loans, you don't want to discriminate, and you have to work with one particular conception of fairness. Which one is it, and why do you use that? So there's an incredible number: demographic parity, predictive parity, calibration, equalized odds, for example, requires you to have an equal true positive and true negative rate. So you have to do what statisticians call, you perhaps, if you've gone through that, you may remember that confusion matrix. You have to specify a particular conception of fairness in terms of a confusion matrix. And then you can test whether you hit that required ratio of false positives and false negatives, right? Otherwise, you don't know what to look for. So ethics by design is this conceptual engineering. How do you construe your basic values, and how do you break them down? That's the requirements engineering part. And how do you build prototypes or new systems on that basis? So that's, and for the first time in ethics, and this is quite exciting for ethicists in this day and age, is that we have a kind of an empirical cycle going on. Because I work with a certain idea of fairness or democracy or privacy, and then I squeeze requirements out of it. I build something that is accommodating those requirements, and then I see whether we like it or not. Right? So that's the circle, and now we have data points to see what we should be doing. Now the third idea is what I promised. It's the good news. So this is all more work for us to do, but there's some good news. There's a problem of value pluralism. There are how many values? You've seen already many, and I've mentioned many: privacy and autonomy and equity and justice. We cannot selectively shop in this and say, well, we'll do safety today and human dignity next year. All of these things need to be taken into account. So all of these things need to happen. And there are constantly conflicts and dilemmas. If I'm more open, then confident and accountable, then confidentiality and privacy may go. If I focus on safety, that will be expensive. That is at the expense of my efficiency. So constantly dilemmas and conflicts. So we're constantly what we call morally overloaded. We want to be such good persons. We want to do this and that and that and that. So moral overload is prosperity and sustainability, security and privacy, efficiency and safety, accountability and confidentiality, and not or. Now this is, I showed you some successful stories from the Netherlands. This is a failure from the Netherlands. This is near The Hague. This exploded. It was optimized for sustainability. So it was a light materials and aluminium and plastic and liquid gas. But we hadn't thought about the safety, so it exploded. So what you want is you want a sustainable and safe bus, right? Both. So we had some problems. I think you also had some problems with a national electronic patient record system. Constantly claims that it could lower the cost in healthcare, it could increase the patient safety, but there's always this worry about privacy. Now, this whole idea failed. It was a 300 million wasted innovation because it was worked on and people proposed it, and then finally the upper house rejected it because of privacy considerations. The privacy consideration should have be put on the table at the beginning and functioned as a requirement for the design of that system, but it was not taken seriously enough. And the same with smart meters. Privacy again threw this whole thing out of the window. In order to reach our CO2 emission targets in Europe, we have to turn every household into a smart node in a network to do peak shaving and load balancing, etc. And therefore we have to have that information. But you also have to think about the privacy. It was called a smart meter, but it was not a smart meter, it was a stupid meter because it should have included privacy considerations right from the start. Later on, it's often too costly and impossible. So what's the structure of the problem? The structure of the problem, and this is the beginning of the good news, so stay tuned. We want sustainability and we want privacy. We want privacy and we want security, for example. Industry, the constant discussions about privacy and cameras, right? And both have a fair point, right? We know that. Now, the structure of the problem of moral overload is as follows. You want your privacy above a certain threshold level, and you want your security above a certain threshold level. So for the ideal solutions to your problem, it's the right upper hand white square. But often you're struggling with a first stupid camera system that gives you razor-sharp images of innocent citizens and blurred images of the crooks, right? And so that's not good. You have neither. Or you have a slightly better, or even much better system that you hang everywhere, and now you have a lot of security, but unfortunately not your privacy. Or you don't hang it everywhere, and you have a lot of privacy, but unfortunately not your security. You want a third, a really smart camera system that allows you to reach that wide upper hand white square, where you satisfy both of your values, accommodate both of your values above a certain threshold level. And you see, this is the moral push towards innovations where you satisfy as many of your values as you can. The surprise is this is a moral principle from an area of philosophy that is very remote from technology. And the principle is as follows. If you have an obligation to do both A and B, privacy and security, sustainability and privacy, you have a second order obligation. What that precisely means, I will leave to the questions. We have a second order obligation to see to it that we can do both A and B. So if I have an obligation to save your life and I have an obligation to save your life, but unfortunately I'm standing here, so I can only save his life and not yours. But if I have a clever idea, for example, stand in the middle and throw two ropes or two broomsticks or whatever, so then the difference between one life saved and two lives saved is my clever idea, my hunch. Oh, if I could stand in the middle. That's the innovative move, because now I can satisfy more of my obligations than I could without my smart idea. You see that? Let's have more smart ideas of that type, and everything will be fine. So the moral axiom of responsible innovation is if you can change the world by innovation today so that you can satisfy more of your obligations tomorrow, you have a moral obligation to innovate today. And we do this all the time. Privacy by design is a very good example, right? So we have the functionality of compute and IT, and at the same time respect, we have found solutions where we can use the data and do that in a privacy-respecting way. For example, this, you want to count the number of people here, but you don't want to disclose their identities. This technique is called coarse graining the data. And there are many, many examples. Coarse graining, this is computer science, but it's privacy-enhancing, privacy-respecting computer science. So K-anonymity, differential privacy, homomorphic encryption for privacy-preserving machine learning, synthetic data and analysis on synthetic data. Just skip a couple of, but these are all examples. And here, for example, a recent paper from my colleagues in PISA, privacy and utility and fairness. So what they're saying is training and deploying machine learning models that simultaneously adhere to principles of fairness and privacy while ensuring good utility poses a significant challenge. That is the kind of challenge that we have to put on the table. That is where we need to be. And similarly for design for responsibility. Hence, the holy grail is explainable AI. How can we use these powerful devices and have the wonderful epistemic and knowledge results that they can produce, while at the same time remaining responsible because we know what we're doing. We can explain what we do. Right? So, for example, these feature mapping or heat maps are ways to, let's say, force these very complex neural nets to give up their secrets, right? So you, for example, it's called ablation. So you filter out certain things and you can see and learn what the system has been looking at. In order to identify this as a train, it obviously has been looking at the rails more than at the vehicle itself, right? You can see that it stands out. So now we get an idea of what the system has been looking at. Here, for example, in identifying something as a zebra, it has looked for 53% to the stripe pattern, 41% to the horse-shaped pattern, and 29% to the background. Right? Now, for certain applications, logistical ones or retail ones, this may be good enough. This may give me a feel what the system has been looking at so that I can justify having acted upon and decided about your future, for example, on the basis of the system. And for some applications in healthcare, for example, it may not be enough. So we can design for defeaters, right? So this is designing a system in such a way that it's easy for the user and the operator to pick up whether the system is going out of its comfort zone. Right? So now it gives me information about this is going in the wrong direction. Design for contestability. So you see, design for attribution. Is something computer generated or is it human generated? And Joshua Benjo and Stuart Russell, very important people and researchers in AI, have contributed to this paper, and they say, if something is allowed an AI application or generative AI application is admitted to the market, is introduced to the market, it must demonstrate a reliable detection mechanism for the content that it generates so that you can find out whether it has been generated by a computer or by a human being. So this idea is getting some traction. For example, the WHO has published in 2021 this report on artificial intelligence in healthcare. And it's come up with 6 guiding principles for its design and use. And it says AI systems should be designed demonstrably and systematically to conform to the principles and human rights with which they cohere. They should be designed to assist humans. You see this focus on, it has to be designed right ab initio, right from the start, otherwise it's too late and it will not happen. Design for values is the explicit, in the same report of the WHO, which is the guiding document for applications of AI in healthcare. Design for values is the explicit transposition of moral and social values into context-dependent design requirements. That's the idea. And the same for this commission, also an initiative of the Netherlands, of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. A commission was mentioned in the introduction, a global commission on the responsible use of artificial intelligence in the military domain. And that's of course, obviously very, very important. And that's about meaningful human control. We've produced this book as a research group in the Netherlands that's working on meaningful human control. If these systems go out and do their stuff on the battlefield just by themselves, who is responsible for that? Is there some form of meaningful human control so that humans can still claim to be responsible, or we can attribute responsibility? So that's a key issue. Again, that has to be designed for. If you don't do it, it won't happen. And there are many of those areas where you could, find wonderful challenges if you want to contribute, but you have to make these ethical challenges your starting point. Compute versus sustainability, scale versus explainability, AI accuracy versus privacy, fairness versus accuracy, autonomy versus responsibility. So there's a lot of work to be done, and it's not the frivolous and trivial applications that I gave some examples of. So responsible innovation with AI, designed for moral values, can give you moral progress, because I have given, in passing, a definition of moral progress. If I can satisfy by my smart innovation more of my moral obligations than I could do without, I have made moral progress. So, and I close off with this. These people are on the right track, but they got it wrong. And it's very important to realize that they got it wrong, because Sundar Pichai said in 2009 in Financial Times, let's balance innovation and the protection of citizens. You see what he's opposing? He's opposing innovation versus the protection of citizens. I come back to that. Elizabeth Denham, the Information Commissioner here in the UK, said in her acceptance speech, it's not privacy or innovation, it's privacy and innovation. Now you see that they got it wrong, because they oppose innovation to ethical values. But what I have suggested is the following, is that we have ethical values that need to be accommodated and satisfied, co-satisfied, and preferably more than less. Right? The innovation is the solution to that value conflict. It's not innovation versus values. It is values that are battling, like privacy and sustainability, security and privacy, and innovation, the smart camera system, the privacy-respecting technology, is the innovation that allows you to have your cake and eat it. So, and it's this kind of moral necessity that you create. We know that necessity is the mother of all invention. So if you make it hard on yourself, and you take this ethical starting point, you know that you have to think of something. And this is the Apollo 13. You know this famous story, Houston, we've had a problem. The filter is gone. If you don't solve this problem, then 4 people will die there. Right? And the NASA mission control, Gene Kranz, who was the head engineer there, he talked to his people, and you see there, they're looking at the filter that broke down. They have to think of something. And he said to his team, all the engineers, when you leave this room, you must leave believing that this crew is coming home. I don't give a damn about the odds. We've got to believe that this crew is coming home. That is a kind of moral necessity. There is no let's forget about the privacy. Let's forget about the sustainability. Let's focus on this. Let's focus on that. No, you have to do these things. All of them. And preferably more of them than less. So that's the, I think and this is the final slide. Then I'm right on time. You know this trolley problem, right? Probably there were meetings here in this room that discussed it. But so you're at the switch and the train comes down, and if you don't do anything, it will hit those 5 unfortunate people tied to the track. Don't ask me why they're there, but this is a philosophical thought experiment. But you can switch the lever and then divert the train to go into the other track and hit that unfortunate one person. Now the question is the moral dilemma, and philosophers love this because they go on and on and on about this. So what would you do? Well, it's calculation, it's a utilitarian calculation, or you are very principled, etc. Interesting thing is that if I discuss this with my engineers, students in Delft, they give a different answer, which would actually, get them removed from the philosophy seminar, because it's not an answer that philosophers would accept, right? They say, this is a bad design. It's a bad design. Why? This poor guy at the lever, has his moral dilemma as a result of it's a function of the architecture. Someone has designed it in such a way that there is only two things to choose from, and he would have liked to have a third option. And then they start to think about, can we make the lever, let's say a brake that stops the train before it hits the junction? Well, we wouldn't have this nasty dilemma, right? So, and of course, in a philosophy seminar room, that's not the way to go. But in the real world, and these people are going to be railway track engineers, and they prevent accidents. Want to prevent accidents. And what they also want to prevent is post-traumatic stress disorder of the operator who was confronted with this dilemma that was just a result of this architecture. So can we stop the trolley before it hits the junction? That's also something that we need to think about. I would leave you with that, and there is time for questions, I think. Yeah.